All right. Good morning, everyone. So I see. I'm very proud to see that many people have actually made it after last night's, networking event and such. So thank you for being here. My name is Thijs from Loon, as I was introduced. Basically, my focus for organizations is to work with corporate training and anything around coaching and building your learning and development solutions inside your organization. And as a result of that, and as a background to that, I want to focus today from hands to head to heart around focusing on your junior staff members, especially with the coming of AI. Because a lot of these things have changed and are basically developing themselves at like a neck-breaking speed. So, a couple of things that I've highlighted, and I've looked into this, and I track all these AI projects, implementation parts, and great results that AI builds for all of us. And every week there's probably like 50 or 60 different articles that showcase how cool AI is and how much we can do. And I picked out a few just as an exploration, but one of the things that I saw about 10 months ago was somebody who's called Elon Musk, who talked about the capability overhang, which was a very interesting tool, because the capability overhang, for those who don't know, is if we would stop developing AI at this particular moment in time, and we would implement what we have developed so far, it would take companies and individuals about 20 years to maximally use what has actually been invented so far, right? So if we would stop today with AI integration. Clearly that's not happening, because when we look at these other studies, for example, from OpenAI and BGC, the Boston Consulting Group, they have actually done a lot of research around the usability of AI, and they've basically pitched both heavy users versus lighter users of AI. And they see very significant differences in the way that then through that, the productivity of people goes up, the amount of people that actually build great tools and such goes up, but there's a very massive difference in terms of how experienced people are if they're actually able to make that happen or not, right? So to give some numbers around that, about 85, so in the Boston Consulting Group research, about 85% of the people who use AI, they use AI from more like the basic features. But the so-and-so 10% that don't and are the really heavy users, they actually see about 10 hours a week increase in their productivity versus the basic users. This is a massive setup, and if you actually extrapolate that towards what companies themselves are doing, then you see very big gains of productivity, and through that revenue, impact, and such throughout the corporate sphere at this point. So there's loads of these kind of researchers that are putting things in place. There's another one that I looked at, which was HubSpot. So the HubSpot engineering team, they started from 2023 to integrate AI, but more as kind of like a boring, quote-unquote, kind of setting, which meant that AI became kind of like a standard package as part of what people within HubSpot would use in this engineering part. So this means that when people would be onboarded, that they would already have that kind of like element where you just expect people to be AI native. And they've actually seen by putting this into their onboarding that 98% of their engineering group uses AI. And they've seen 46% productivity gains as a result of this implementation. Again, fantastic tools and fantastic progress that has been made by using AI. But here's a challenge. Because 2024 and 2025 were these times that we started to implement AI as like, hey, let's replace the tasks, let's automate everything that we do, and let's through that build much larger productivity and impact with what it is that we are doing. But over time, we started to find out, and this has become more clear late 2025 and now, that we also automated the learning process of those people inside the organization. And as a result of that, a number of these learning processes that we would naturally have as people who would join an organization started to get lost because so much was automated. Yeah, so the critical thinking is one key element that AI, especially for our juniors, has now taken away. Critical thinking is not gone, but it is much less now focused on in your day-to-day work when AI solves so many of these challenges. And that same thing is mentorship. This is more a question around mid-level management, but essentially the mentorship where you help your juniors build your capability and the way that you explain to your juniors why things are done and how things are done in an effective way is also getting lost. Because so much, again, is automated. And also managers actually see themselves changing into the data checkers that AI provides, right? And we call this the human in the loop, meaning that humans now become part of that step-by-step automated process that AI is taking us through. And it creates a backdrop and a backstep towards people's development inside your organization. And who this affects the most are juniors in your organization. So, let me tell you a story. A long time ago, 2004, I worked for Google. And there was in December 2004, it was a very terrible day because there was a huge tsunami in Thailand, if you guys all remember who are old enough for that. That was a tremendous disaster. Now, Google at that time was still using Gmail as part of a marketing ploy to ensure that you would get targeted advertising into your email inbox. And as I was the only Dutch representative in the European office at that time for Google, I had the lovely job to go through all of the word strings and figure out, all right, which of these word strings is actually going to trigger some potentially sensitive advertisement that Google really does not want as a referral from a marketing perspective into their Gmail advertising. And it kind of felt like, looking at a polar bear's fur and picking out black hairs that might still be stuck in that polar bear's fur. In other words, I had to spend about 6 hours that day to go through all these word strings in Dutch and figure out which ones we would need to flag to undo, poor targeted advertising throughout the Gmail filters. Very manual, but it taught me a lot. It actually taught me how the system worked. It taught me how it built up the different strings of words. It told me how the advertising system would connect to it and pull ads as a result of it. So doing that manual labor, doing that manual focus created that understanding and that deeper understanding how the system works. And as a result, how I could better work with it, better manipulate it, and sometimes also better advise my clients about it. And there we go. And this is something that at this point is starting to happen for us. Because when we implement AI with the speed that we are doing now, the chances are bigger and bigger that we are creating a firewall, a wall between our juniors and the rest of our organization that actually can build AI, but also build the talent for the next generation. We're about to lose it. And why is that? So essentially, 39% of people, of employees, they report gains using AI. They say it works great. However, there's a big difference between C-suite leaders who feel AI ready, right? 69% of them do, but juniors don't. There's a really big gap. About 12% of the juniors who join your company now have no clue, or most of them, have no clue how AI, in a strategic sense and in the overall sense of support, will help your company over time. And the pipeline is breaking as a result of it. The pipeline of junior people who you can effectively train inside your organization to bring them up. And AI stole that example that I just gave, which is learning by doing. That deep digging work that we as maybe older or more experienced programmers, but also managers, trainers, educators, went through. That part is taken out for our juniors. And because of that, the juniors are context poor. They are not really sure why something works the way it works, because so much of it tends to get automated. And this is something that we can actually help build. And here's the good part of this. Organizations, but especially governments, are actually seeing this challenge today. And governments have actually started to admit, yep, we cannot train our workforce at the right speed that's necessary to ensure that we can build for the next generation. Who has that expertise in-house? You. Organizations. Tech companies that actually build the pipeline of the juniors that are coming in. Now, a number of you might say, well, you know what? If I cannot train enough juniors, I'll just hire more seniors. The problem there is, though, that too many seniors are now actually starting to cost too much money. Their pricing is going up more exponentially, definitely in different regions, than that otherwise. So, in other words, the seniors are not quote unquote cheap enough to actually keep on hiring. And there is also just a too low amount of them to actually make sure that it fits with the amount of work that's available for them. So, governments admit that this is actually not happening. So in the Philippines, for example, you have the EBIT Act, where essentially education can then be brought into organizations, and they basically say, you train and we accredit, and they actually have budget for that in the Philippines that is actively passed on to organizations who built those kind of academies inside and accredit people who work through that and who get through that. Vietnam is also doing this, and quite aggressively. In Vietnam, the law on employment has been implemented and also provides a certain budget for those companies that can actually build that pipeline. There's also a very big $50 million EU pledge where they build cash for digital and green upskilling for those inside your organization that where you can build this for. Right? So there's a shift needed when it comes to that. So one, we have that gap, but the second part is, in that shift, we also need to understand we shouldn't view training as purely a cost structure. We can actually, with these budgets, build training as a support system that allows us to partially pay for that academy that trains up our new group of juniors to become effective seniors. So the whole idea is then build it, don't buy it. Because that allows you to build that pipeline long term. Now, internal mobility, that's your supply chain. So what you see also a lot of companies do at this point is that they say, we are going to hire people differently. Because the 2026 trends, they basically say, well, the seniors are getting too expensive, but then we need to repost what we do for the juniors. So we need to focus people to be ready for internal mobility. How do we do that? We need to create people who are great at unlearning bad things and relearning new things really quickly. 2, we need to create pipelines inside of our organization where we train people, but we also allow them inside of our organization to move through the ranks and really build that seniority capability that allows people to build for that next generation. So experience hiring is dead, but capability, relearning and retraining hiring is very much up. So that new capability is a key skill to teach people as they come in, but also to already hire people for if you can. So how do we do that? So inside, we can look at the academy framework, and I'm typically thinking about 3 steps, right? The first step is hands. So essentially, if you think about your juniors, let's say that the AI does all the easy work. Juniors have, as a result, no safe struggle. I mentioned this before. But a simulation is, well, or a fix is, can you build simulation training inside of your organization? Can you do that to make sure that people kind of like on purpose make mistakes? And you do that by creating broken environments. So you create an environment in which the setup and the skill and the tool is broken, and you allow your juniors, kind of like in a sandbox setting, to fix that. And through that build experience, not just by understanding the nuts and bolts that AI gives, but actually determining if AI has actually put these nuts and bolts in the right place already. Huh? And then from there, you force them to fix the bug manually. Yeah? And this way, before using Copilot or anything like that. And this way, people build that capability themselves, just learning by doing. Yeah? And create these repetitive tools. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of things to think about during this session. And my first question to you is, if you think about this first step, and you don't have to reply to this right away, but it could be just a good question to ask yourself. Think about one manual simulation that your juniors could start doing from today. So if you could think about one manual simulation task that your juniors could start today, what would that be? Let that float a bit and see what comes up. Yeah? But that's a good starting point. From there, we need to think about the second step, heads. Heads are essentially our leaders, our managers, our seniors. Those are the folks who are then internally going to train people to ensure that they understand more of the why. And this is the part where juniors get stuck. Juniors are typically paralyzed on the why. They don't know when there's a certain problem that comes up, and they share a certain solution that AI provided with them. But you as a manager start to become a little bit critical and say, hey, can you tell me what the background is of that particular solution that you've created? Lots of time, then juniors freeze. They don't understand what that background is. This is where you need to build the capability. So you fix that by doing, for example, a narrated code review, where you sit down with your juniors and you take them step by step through what that code is, why it's programmed that way, and how it's built from step to step and through that troubleshoot and problem solve, and build the critical thinking capabilities as part of that whole process in which you train your people on. Yeah? So this way, seniors learn to explain not just the decision, but they actually need to correct the error that's coming up. Yeah? And once you start to measure that, that's when you can also create that as a part of people's promotion. So basically, when people are good at showcasing that they have the capability to think critically, that's actually an area that allows them to get promoted inside the organization and grow through the ranks. That's a core capability part of the framework. So let me ask you this, and just by a show of hands, who of you in this room has an internal coaching or mentoring program active in their organization? Okay. Kind of, Emmanuel, thank you. Yeah. So that's about a quarter of this group, right? And that's understandable because day-to-day work is so busy. And one of the reasons why this is so tricky is because it slows you down. This takes time. But typically, what I always say to people who find it difficult to actually explain things or, bring their junior staff along and such, we need to go slow to go fast. You need to build people's capabilities first before you actually go faster in the implementation of it. Yeah? So if you struggle that first 1 or 2 months, but afterwards more and more people can pick it up and more thoroughly, that's when you do well. And companies who do this well and who actually have that pipeline, they essentially have the ability to share knowledge. So knowledge is not just kept with the seniors, but it's also then forced by the company to ensure that it's shared with the juniors. Lastly, hearts. This is essentially the part where people feel like gig workers. Many juniors say, look, I am somewhere sitting at home, checking code from a distance, but I don't really feel that I'm part of the organization. People need to understand that they are actually part of the organization. And very thorough, and as much as you can, very customized onboarding needs to be done. So organizations don't just onboard people in terms of like, this is your job, but this is what you need to do, but also, this is the company that you're part of. Here's who we are, and here's why we do what we do. And here is why you are a great part of this company. So that cultural onboarding where people feel connected to, that is something that creates that long-term motivation and willingness to learn. Yeah? So this is a question again that I have for you in the audience, just to think about. If there's one thing, one element of your company culture that you would want your people who onboard new to learn, what would that be? What's that one element that you think this is crucial for people in my organization who join to understand? Just a couple of things at the float. Let me round off, right? So essentially here in this scenario, you have two ways to look at it. So let's say that you have the left-hand side, where you have basically a distance where the code is checked from certain clients in the European Union, but there is a junior person who checks the AI. AI does the checking of the code, and you're good to go. But then all of a sudden, the policy change happens, and then that code that has been set up becomes a zombie code. You know, it works, but it breaks under pressure, right? Policies change. As a result, the AI needs to be reprogrammed. The junior does not know how this works in detail, so it breaks down. Here's the other part. Let's say that you have a company that provides support for Australian clients, where you actually let some of these cases come through an academy first, before passing it back. That academy first element, however it might be slow at the start, allows people to really deep dive into the code and not just check the code, but actually check the AI so you understand the why of how that coding works and how that support through that is given. These are two different scenarios. This one, the one for Australia, is the long-term solution. The other one is the fast one, but it can break under stress. So what I want to let people think about, and this is some of the things that we do as a company, is to actually start building solutions for yourself. Now, one of the things that I do is use the tool for Lego Serious Play. Lego Serious Play is basically a way that allows you to bring out lots of ideas and thoughts through your subconscious mind by playing with Lego blocks. Sounds like fun and maybe a little childish, but trust me, it's not. Companies like Google, Shell, Samsung, NASA, they all use this system in order to strategize at the highest levels. And we use that too in order for you to build and start building your solutions. So, before I go there, let me ask, or let me showcase one thing, and that's my wrap up for today. I implore you, don't leave your juniors behind. Make sure that they actually get into that mix where they understand, well, the technology part is easy, but to understand the context behind it, so they can actually grow the next generation. And in the process, stay loyal to your own organization, your own company, and your own goals. And if you do it well, you can even get it partially subsidized. So if you want to brainstorm a little bit about that, come to our stand in the corner there for Betterworks Asia. We have a number of Lego blocks, of course, with us. I'm going to run a session at 11 and 12 o'clock and a few sessions in the afternoon. It only takes 20 minutes, but it'll help you brainstorm, ideate, yeah, and create maybe some starting solutions for, in this case, your junior problem. With that, thank you for listening. Really appreciate your attention and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thijs, for such inspiring and valuable speech.